My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you're here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, Jesus, after a long time that we have spent in festival throughout the whole weeks of Easter and then the weeks after, whenever we celebrated the Ascension and Pentecost, we now find ourselves in ordinary time, which is kind of fancy church speak for ordinary, everyday, boring time. There's nothing more exciting. There's no big feast at this moment in time. We're just in the ordinary, run-of-the-mill, ordinary part of the year. I mean, it's exactly as it says on the tin, so to speak. But we've had a long time of feasting, for sure. And then we had an even longer time before that of preparation for Easter throughout all of the weeks of Lent. So we've had, in a sense, lots of focus in our prayer and in our time of preparation. We've had something guiding our reflection, be it a time of penance throughout all the weeks of Lent, or maybe a time of resurrection and joy, looking forward to the coming of the Holy Spirit. And now we're just kind of in that ordinary time. So, what are we to do with this? In a sense, it's a little bit like we're in boring time, We're back to green vestments again at Mass. Nothing more exciting than that. And, well, what are we to do with this? Well, we're called to sanctify that all the same. In fact, we need ordinary time because we just can't live at a kind of a constant feasting or constant penitence. We need the in-between lull time in order that we, I suppose, in a sense, can appreciate the feasting all the more. But more than just needing a little break from kind of high-octane feasting, we need ordinary time in the church to remind us that that is, in fact, the daily bread of Christianity. It's in the ordinary, everyday life where we are called to be Christians. It's in the ordinary, run-of-the-mill, routine, boring time, in fact, when sometimes it can be more difficult to be a Christian because we have to really lift up those things for your greater glory. How do we lift up a boring Tuesday afternoon when we've got maybe exams to do? Maybe we would rather be somewhere else than stuck in an office or cleaning our bedroom or whatever it is. But all of those things, Jesus, have to be raised up to your glory too. And so this ordinary time reminds us that it's all for you. It's all for you. And what we're called to do is to put our back into it and to be generous with how we react to this ordinary time so that we can be ordinary people too. And that part of our ordinariness will be what helps us to become saints, so that we don't have to kind of live at a kind of a constant frenetic pace, or that we have to constantly be looking for more and more penances to do or more exultant prayers to say, but just so that the ordinary moments of our life are where we see you and where we hear you and where we experience you more and more. And in this call of generosity, which is key to ordinary, boring time, we have this beautiful reading from the Mass today, from the first reading from the first book of Kings, where we meet Elijah, this great prophet Elijah. Now, he is in a time of difficulty in Israel. There is a drought throughout the land, and so there's a lot of suffering as a result of that. There is no water in what is already a very dry land. So how are people to cook? How are people to wash? How are people to maintain themselves and their dignity without the ordinary thing of water? And we find him at a particular moment in this great difficulty where he's starving. And he hears your voice, Lord, to go even outside of Israel, to go to a place called Zarephath, a Sidonian town, a place where were not Jews conventionally living. And there you would provide for him. And he sees this widow who's gathering up a few sticks in order that she can prepare kind of a last meal for her and her son. She just has a little bit of oil left and a little bit of grain, and she's going to make this last meal for her son and for her. It's a very touching scene, if we just picture that for a moment, the anguish of this mother who's putting together these final scraps in order that she and her son can eat and then die. And Elijah meets them at this moment, and he says, what are you doing? Bring me some water in your vessel that I can drink. And she tells him, well, I'm just going to make this final meal for my son and I, and then we're going to die. And he says, well, fine, but before you do that, make a little scone for me. Now, that's how the English version that I have before me, that we use at Mass, translates that. And that always makes me laugh. Make me a little scone. So you've got a woman ready for her last meal, and Elijah, the prophet, says, well, make me a scone first. Well, the word in Hebrew is uga ketana, which is, it's translated as a little round cake. And in order to to make that a little bit more acceptable, or with a little bit more understanding, in different English versions, they use different words. So sometimes you'll see a little cake, and sometimes you'll see a scone. Now, if you don't know what a scone is, it's kind of a speciality bread, something that you have with a cup of tea. It's a nice thing to have. It's certainly not the last scraps that you would find in a bread bin. It's kind of a speciality bread. The Italian version that they use at Mass in Italy says, bring me a focaccia, which is itself a kind of a speciality bread. In some Spanish-speaking parts of the world, they say un panecillo. So again, it's like a little kind of round piece of bread. But what I like about this is that Elijah knows that this woman's really down to her last few grains and a little bit of oil and a little bit of water. And he says, well, don't just give me the very basic kind of flat bread that, has no taste, but I want a scone. And I want more than perhaps what you think you're able to give. And there is a lesson in that for us, for how we respond to God, especially in moments of difficulty or moments of ordinary life, which is what we're trying to think about now at this moment, Jesus, is that we want to give more than what we think is necessary. We want to give more even than we think might be good. We want to ask for a scone whenever there is no water at all, or there's no bread, because we know, Jesus, that whatever expectations we might have, you will always exceed those. And whatever act of generosity we can put in will never, ever be exhausted by you. St. Ignatius of Loyola said that God will not be outdone in generosity. And whenever Elijah asks for this scone, he tells this poor woman, this jar of meal will not be spent, and jug of oil shall not be emptied before the day when the Lord sends rain upon the face of the earth. So here they are, midst of drought. How could she possibly see that? This woman isn't even a Jew. She doesn't share the same faith. She doesn't have the same understanding of the Lord that Elijah did. But something about Elijah helped this woman in her faith to put her trust in God, and maybe even to put her trust in this prophet. And so she makes him the scone, and the food does not run out. So she and her son are able to eat. And the story then has to continue, but this is where we find it today in the Mass, in the readings for the Mass. So Elijah essentially asks this woman for far more than what she thinks she can provide. And maybe sometimes, if we look at it from the other perspective, that maybe we feel God asks us more than we think we're able to provide. Maybe let's think especially in a boring moment, that God is maybe asking something of us and we just don't have the energy for it, or we just don't have the interest in being able to respond. Maybe we lack courage to be able to follow through on all of the things that we feel God might be putting into our heart. Well, let's think about the scone of Elijah. The more we give to God, the more he will give back in return, because he cannot be outdone in his generosity. And so perhaps it's in the ordinary moments whenever we have to put in more. It's in the ordinary moments when we have to be even more generous with God and with others and with his church, because that's where God is really going to exhaust his own supplies of mercy, his own supplies of grace for us, because nothing we can give God will be surpassed by what he can give to us. He can always give us much, much more than our little expectations. So let's give God more than a scone. Let's ask for more than a scone, in the hope and the expectation that whatever your bountiful mercy for us, Lord, will far exceed any expectations. And for this, we, of course, take your mother as an example, who, when she said yes, allowed your grace and mercy to abound in her own life. Help us, Jesus, always to go the extra mile and to give more than we think, than we possibly have in our heart, and to ask you for a scone. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me during this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, St. Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.